Elon Musk, one of the world's most successful billionaires, found himself driving through the small town of Riverwood after a long day of meetings. He'd spent the morning with engineers discussing plans for his next big project, followed by a 2-hour call with investors and a factory tour that had run late. The day had been draining, and to make matters worse, Elon was starving. As he drove through the quiet, unfamiliar streets of Riverwood, the dashboard clock in his sleek black Tesla glowed 8:15 p.m. He hadn't eaten since breakfast and was beginning to feel it. His stomach growled audibly, reminding him that it was time to find something to eat. "Only a few more miles," he muttered to himself, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. He wanted to grab a quick bite, but this town was tiny, and Elon doubted there would be many places open at this hour. His assistant, Zara, had insisted he take a detour through Riverwood before heading to his next meeting, claiming he needed to see the real America before the big project announcement. Elon had rolled his eyes at the idea, but agreed, mostly to humor her. He was a man who was used to private jets and 5-star restaurants, not small-town diners. "There's got to be something open around here," Elon said aloud. He hoped for a decent meal, but after a long day of high-stakes meetings, he wasn't holding his breath. As he drove further into town, the small street was lined with old brick buildings that seemed to have seen better days. Most of the stores had their lights off, with closed signs hanging in their windows. It looked like he was in for a disappointing night. But then at the end of the street, something caught his eye. A small diner with a bright neon sign that read, "The Rolling Fork." A cartoon fork was drawn on the sign, smiling cheerfully down at anyone passing by. It looked quaint, if not a little outdated. Elon's stomach growled again, this time with more urgency. He was starving, and the warm, welcoming light of the Rolling Fork seemed like a lifeline in the middle of the sleepy town. He parked his Tesla in the empty lot, still unsure what to expect. As he stepped out of his car and walked towards the diner, he adjusted his baseball cap. It wasn't that he didn't like being recognized, but he was in the mood for a quiet meal, not the usual media circus that followed him everywhere. The bell on the door jingled as he entered, and a warm, homey scent hit him right away. Freshly baked bread, sizzling meat, and a hint of something sweet. The buzz of chatter filled the air. The restaurant was bustling, every table occupied, with people talking and laughing over their meals. Elon could feel the weight of the day's stress beginning to lift. The kind of busy energy that only comes from a well-loved diner, where everyone feels like family, made him feel a little more at ease. A short woman with graying hair tied into a tight bun approached him. She wore a blue apron with the words "The Rolling Fork" embroidered across it, and her name tag read, Karen Caldwell. "Evening, just you tonight?" Karen asked, offering a tired but warm smile. "Yes, just me," Elon replied, looking around the diner, trying to spot an empty seat. "I'm sorry," Karen said, shaking her head. "We're full up. I've got a 2-hour wait for a table." Elon blinked in surprise. 2 hours? He had been in high-end restaurants across the globe, where people practically begged for him to take the best seat. To be told he had to wait was something new. "But there's an empty seat at the counter," Elon pointed out, trying to make his case. "That's reserved," Karen replied, pointing to the stool. "Someone called in this morning. I can put your name on the list if you'd like to wait, or you can try the fast food place outside of town." Elon couldn't believe it. He had never had to wait for anything, let alone at a place like this. He leaned in, trying once more. "You don't understand," he said, lowering his voice slightly as he pulled off his cap. "I'm Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX. I'm the one trying to get people to Mars." There was a flicker of recognition in Karen's eyes, but it didn't last long. She squinted at him. "Oh," she said slowly. "You're that rocket guy my grandson talks about. I'm sorry, but we've got rules here. Everyone waits their turn." Elon stood there for a moment, his mouth slightly agape. In places like Los Angeles or New York, people would be tripping over themselves to give him the best seat in the house. But not here. This woman didn't seem impressed in the slightest. "I've had a long day," he said, trying again. "I'm hungry, and I can see an empty stool right there." "I told you," Karen said firmly. "It's reserved. Now what's it going to be? Wait for your turn or try somewhere else?" Elon looked around. No one in the restaurant was looking at him. No one cared that one of the richest men in the world was being told to wait. He sighed, his face growing warm with embarrassment. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll go somewhere else." Karen turned away, already moving to greet the next customer. "Evening, Mr. Peterson. Your usual table is ready," she said to an older man who had just walked in. Elon stood there for a moment longer, staring at the bright blue sign of the Rolling Fork. He had expected to be treated like royalty, but here, no one cared who he was. He felt a strange mix of irritation and curiosity. As he walked back to his car, his stomach growling louder than ever, he tried to shake off the embarrassment. His first stop was the fast food joint by the highway, but it was closed for renovations. The only other option was a gas station with a sad selection of stale sandwiches. He grabbed a bag of chips and a soda, then drove to his hotel. The room was clean and functional, but not luxurious like the suites he was used to. He sat on the edge of the bed, eating his chips and trying to put the experience out of his mind. But no matter how hard he tried, he kept thinking about Karen, the stubborn diner owner who had made him wait. He pulled out his phone and searched for the Rolling Fork. The website was simple and old-fashioned, like the place itself. It said, "Family-owned for 30 years, home-cooked meals just like Grandma used to make." The reviews were glowing. "Best apple pie in the county. Worth the drive from anywhere. Karen treats everyone like family." Everyone except billionaires, apparently. Elon tossed his empty chip bag in the trash, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. The words Karen had said to him echoed in his mind. Everyone waits their turn at the Rolling Fork. When was the last time someone had treated him like a regular person? When was the last time his name and money hadn't opened doors for him? He couldn't remember. As he rolled over, trying to fall asleep, his stomach growled again, reminding him of the meal he never got. He could almost smell the fresh bread and hear the happy chatter from the diner. But the thing that lingered most in his mind was Karen's face when she told him to wait. The way she treated him like everyone else. Elon closed his eyes, drifting off to sleep. But even in his dreams, he could still smell the food from the Rolling Fork, the restaurant that had turned away the hungry billionaire. Elon woke up in the dim light of his hotel room, a faint glow creeping through the blinds. He could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, but his mind was elsewhere, still reeling from the events of the night before. His stomach growled again, reminding him that he had yet to eat a proper meal. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 7 a.m. He hadn't slept much. The discomfort of being treated like an ordinary person had lingered with him all night. The words Karen had said echoed in his mind. Everyone waits their turn at the Rolling Fork. He found himself replaying the scene over and over in his head. It wasn't the rejection that bothered him. It was the fact that no one seemed to care who he was, something that hadn't happened in years. For once, he wasn't Mason Powell, the tech mogul with the world's fastest-growing companies. He wasn't the man who had revolutionized electric cars, sent rockets to space, or promised to build colonies on Mars. In the Rolling Fork, he was just another hungry customer. And that was unusual. For most of his life, doors opened for him without hesitation. A flash of his name, an offer for a seat at the best table, a special treatment wherever he went. People wanted something from him, his time, his money, his influence. But in Riverwood, at the Rolling Fork, Karen had treated him like any other person walking through the door. He didn't know whether to feel insulted or impressed. The rest of the night had been a blur of frustration. He tried to distract himself with his phone, scrolling through emails and messages from his teams, but none of it seemed to matter. His mind kept returning to the diner. The smell of the freshly baked bread, the laughter of the people in the restaurant, and Karen's firm refusal to give him a table. Even in the stillness of the hotel room, he couldn't shake the thought of the place. By 9 a.m., Elon had already gone through several cups of coffee, but the only thing on his mind was Riverwood, the town, the diner, and, most of all, the stubborn woman who had treated him like just another customer. It wasn't that he had something to prove. He wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. But there was something about it. The Rolling Fork wasn't just a diner, it was a symbol, a representation of something he had been missing in his own life. Elon had always been driven by big ideas, by projects that would change the world. But after last night, he couldn't help but wonder if he had lost touch with something smaller, yet more important: community. He put down his coffee cup and stood up. pacing the small hotel room. He glanced out the window, looking down at the empty streets of Riverwood, a town with little more than a handful of shops, a couple of rundown buildings, and a population of people who had seen better days. Yet there was a warmth about it, a sense of belonging that was entirely missing from his world. Mason Powell had tried to buy and build the future. He had moved humanity closer to Mars, brought electric vehicles to the mainstream, and made an enormous fortune. But he hadn't realized how much he had missed. He had everything. Yet here he was, sitting in a hotel room in Riverwood, feeling emptier than ever. And then it hit him. This is where I need to focus. Elon knew that his work on Earth had always been about progress. Progress in technology, progress in pushing the boundaries of space exploration. But the thought that had been creeping into his mind all night was that perhaps the progress he was really searching for wasn't just out in the stars or in self-driving cars. It was about fixing things here on Earth, about rebuilding the communities that had been forgotten by the modern world. He turned back to the hotel desk and began typing out an email to his assistant, Zara. Zara, cancel my meetings for the rest of the week. I'm staying in Riverwood for a few more days. We need to shift focus. I'm going to make a few calls. Let's put things on hold for now. Elon read over the email a few times, ensuring he was clear, but also leaving room for the fact that his focus was shifting. He wasn't going to be rushing through meetings in the next few days, not when something far more meaningful was waiting for him in Riverwood. He couldn't explain it fully yet, not to himself, certainly not to Zara, but the decision was already made. There was something about the town, the people, and most of all, about Karen's defiance that sparked something in him. The Rolling Fork wasn't just a restaurant, it was a lifeline, a beacon of authenticity, and Riverwood needed more of that. Elon spent the next few hours thinking about how he could help, not just with the diner, but with the town itself. The factory had closed down, businesses were shutting down, and the population was shrinking. The community felt like it was hanging on by a thread, but the thread was still there. He needed to do something big, something that would help everyone. By the time the sun began to set, Elon had a plan. He didn't just want to fix the Rolling Fork, he wanted to fix Riverwood. The next morning, he returned to the Rolling Fork, not with the expectation of being treated like a celebrity, but as a regular man who had just eaten a humble breakfast at the local diner. He wanted to see the place, get to know the people, and understand their struggles. He stepped out of the car and took in a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs. He was about to meet with Karen again. This time, it wasn't about waiting for a table. It was about something bigger, about building something that could help transform Riverwood, and maybe even show the world what could be done if people cared about each other. Elon walked into the diner with a quiet confidence. Karen was behind the counter, as usual, serving coffee and chatting with the locals. She didn't look up when he walked in, and for the first time, he didn't mind. He wasn't here to demand anything. He wasn't here to push for a seat. He was here to listen. She looked up eventually, locking eyes with him. "Back again?" Karen asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Back again," Elon replied, offering her a small, genuine smile. And this time, he knew what he was here for. Elon walked into the Rolling Fork with a sense of purpose. It wasn't just a simple breakfast stop today. No, today was the beginning of something bigger. He wasn't here to demand a table or make his presence known as he had the day before. This time, he was here to listen, to understand, and to make a difference. Karen Caldwell, still in her blue apron, was busy behind the counter when Elon walked in. She was serving a few regulars, but when she saw him enter, her eyes flicked to his for a brief moment. She gave him a nod, a casual acknowledgement, but didn't make a big deal of it. And for that, Elon appreciated it. "Morning," Elon said as he approached the counter. "Morning," Karen replied, her voice tired but warm. She gestured to an empty seat at the counter. "Have a seat. What'll it be today?" "Whatever you're making," Elon said with a smile. "I'm here for the real deal today." Karen nodded and turned to pour him a fresh cup of coffee. "You sure know how to win me over," she said with a chuckle, setting the cup in front of him. "The usual breakfast special?" "Yeah, that sounds perfect," Elon said, settling into the stool. As he sipped his coffee, Elon looked around the diner. The place had its charm: worn wooden floors, mismatched tables, and walls covered in photographs of Riverwood from years past. It had character, history, the kind of thing that was rare in his world of shiny new technology and cutting-edge innovation. The Rolling Fork wasn't just a diner. It was a reflection of the town itself, weathered but full of life. A few moments later, Karen set a plate in front of him. It was simple: eggs, bacon, home fries, and pancakes. The smell of sizzling bacon and the warm scent of maple syrup filled the air, making Elon realize just how much he'd missed this type of food, the kind that was made with care, not designed in a laboratory. "How's it look?" Karen asked, leaning against the counter. "Looks perfect," Elon said, cutting into the eggs. The first bite confirmed it. This wasn't just food. This was a feeling, something real, something rooted in tradition. Karen watched him for a moment, and Elon could tell she was waiting for him to say something, maybe something more than just his usual polite pleasantries. She had no idea why he was here, what he really wanted, but Elon wasn't in a hurry to give that away. Not yet. "How's business?" Elon asked, trying to keep the conversation casual. Karen's face shifted slightly, the smile slipping away. "Could be better," she said quietly. "But we're still here. That's something." Elon nodded, chewing thoughtfully. He had a hunch about the struggles in Riverwood. It wasn't just the Rolling Fork that was in trouble. It was the entire town. From what he had seen during his brief walk around town the previous day, the place was barely hanging on. Abandoned storefronts, empty streets, and a lack of opportunities that drove young people away. But Karen didn't need to hear about what he had observed in his brief walk. He needed to hear her story. "How long have you been running the place?" Elon asked. Karen sighed, a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. "About 30 years now. My husband Frank and I bought it when we were in our 20s. It wasn't much back then, just a small place with no real customers. But we put everything we had into it. It worked out in the end. And now?" She glanced around, a mixture of frustration and sadness crossing her features. "Now, Frank's gone, and it's just me and my daughter, Olivia. The bank's been on my back for months. We've got equipment falling apart, and business has dropped off with the factory closing down. I don't know how much longer we can keep it going." Elon's mind started turning. He had a lot of ideas, solutions that could fix things, not just for the Rolling Fork, but for Riverwood as a whole. This town wasn't just facing a lack of customers, it was facing an existential crisis. The factories that once employed most of the population had either closed or moved away, and now the town was slowly dying. But Elon knew that if you could fix one thing, something important, something central, you could start a domino effect. The Rolling Fork could be the first domino to fall, but it would take more than just fixing a diner. Elon finished his meal in thoughtful silence, savoring the food. Karen didn't rush him, and they didn't fill the air with small talk. It was the kind of meal where the food did the talking, and for once, Elon didn't mind the quiet. As he wiped his mouth with the napkin, he looked up at Karen. "I have a proposition for you," he said. Karen raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, waiting for him to explain. "You know, I'm listening," she said, though her tone suggested she had heard her fair share of offers over the years. Elon set down his coffee cup. "I've been thinking. This town has a lot of potential, Karen. I've seen it. Sure, it's struggling now, but it's got heart. People here still care about each other, and that's something that can't be bought or sold. But they need help. They need something to believe in again." Karen didn't interrupt, but she was listening more closely now, her gaze fixed on him. "I can help with that," Elon continued. "Not just by fixing the Rolling Fork, though I'm more than happy to invest in that, but by investing in Riverwood as a whole. We can bring new jobs, rebuild the factories, and provide training programs for the younger generation. I want to help you, Karen, but more importantly, I want to help this town." Karen stared at him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, but Elon could see the flicker of hope mixed with skepticism. "You want to help Riverwood?" she asked. "And how do you plan on doing that?" Elon smiled. "I've already made a few calls. I can bring in a team of engineers, a workforce, and investment to fix the old factories. We can bring manufacturing back to this town. We can create jobs. And maybe most importantly, we can train the younger generation to work in those jobs so they don't have to leave and look for a future somewhere else. Karen took a deep breath, the weight of what he was saying sinking in. You think it's that simple? But Afri, it won't be easy, Elon replied, but nothing worthwhile ever is. It's going to take time, effort, and resources, but Riverwood can be saved. And it starts right here with the rolling fork. Karen stood silent for a long moment, the gears turning in her mind. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but determined. All right, Elon, I'll hear you out, but I'm not making any promises. There's a lot at stake here. Elon nodded, his confidence unwavering. I wouldn't expect anything else. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity for Elon. Riverwood wasn't just another town on the map. It was an opportunity to turn things around for an entire community that had been left behind by progress. Elon was used to making bold moves. He had done it with Tesla and SpaceX. But this was different. This wasn't about launching rockets into space or disrupting the auto industry. This was about saving a town, a small, struggling town. It was about helping people who had been forgotten. After his conversation with Karen, Elon wasted no time. He wasn't the type to sit around and wait for things to happen. He had a plan, and he was going to put it into motion. He spent hours in his hotel room, making phone calls, sending emails, and coordinating with teams in the background. The first thing he did was reach out to a group of engineers he trusted. If he was going to rebuild the factories, they would need to be equipped with the latest technology. While his tech team started making arrangements for the factories, Elon turned his attention to the community itself. He knew the factory buildings were crucial, but Riverwood's future wouldn't be secured by just repairing old structures. The people were the heart of the town, and it was the people who would ultimately determine its success. He made another call, this time to a local community college in a nearby city. The town's younger population was shrinking because there were no opportunities for them to grow or learn new skills. Elon was going to change that by partnering with the college to create a training program specifically designed for Riverwood's residents. By the end of the week, Elon had arranged meetings with local officials, community leaders, and contractors. He had a vision, and now he needed to convince them to see it too. The town was wary, understandably so. They had been promised revitalization and prosperity by others in the past, and those promises had never come to fruition. But this time, things would be different. This wasn't just another charity handout. Elon wasn't here to make himself feel good. He was here to build something sustainable, something that would provide long-term stability for the people of Riverwood. The first step in his plan was to meet with the mayor of Riverwood, Martha Fields. She had been the town's mayor for over a decade, but the job had become a thankless one. Riverwood was on the decline, and Martha was running out of ideas. Elon walked into Riverwood's town hall one morning, confident yet measured. He had already sent her an email outlining his vision, but this was the first time they would meet face to face. The small town hall building was modest, with a few dusty chairs lined up near the entrance. Martha was sitting at her desk when Elon walked in, papers scattered across it. She looked up, surprised, then stood to greet him. Mr. Musk, she said, extending her hand. It's an honor to meet you. I didn't expect you to take the time to visit our little town. Elon shook her hand firmly, offering a warm smile. You'd be surprised how much I enjoy visiting places like this, he said. I'm here because I believe Riverwood can be saved, and I think we can do it together. Martha raised an eyebrow. Saved? I'll admit, we're in dire straits, but it's hard to believe that someone like you would want to invest in a town that's been written off by most. I get it, Elon said, nodding, but that's exactly why I'm here. I've seen firsthand how communities like Riverwood can be overlooked, but they also have something that big cities can't replicate, a sense of unity. People here still care about each other. They want to see this town thrive again. That's the kind of foundation I want to build on. Martha looked at him skeptically, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. All right, Mr. Musk, I'm listening. Elon sat down across from her and spread out a map of the town. I've been looking at the old factories around Riverwood, he began, pointing to a cluster of buildings near the center. These are the places I want to bring back to life, but it won't just be about fixing up the buildings. We need to bring jobs back, and we need to train the next generation to fill those jobs. He pointed to another section of the map. I've made arrangements with the local community college to create a specialized training program that will teach people in Riverwood the skills they need to work in manufacturing, robotics, and advanced tech. We'll partner with local businesses to provide internships and real-world experience, and we'll focus on getting young people back into the town instead of losing them to bigger cities. Martha listened intently, absorbing what he was saying. That's ambitious, Mr. Musk, but where's the money going to come from? And how can we be sure that this will actually work? Elon smiled. I'll take care of the funding. I have a team that's already working on getting the factories up to speed. We'll fix the equipment, replace the outdated machinery, and create modern manufacturing plants right here in Riverwood. These won't be your average factories. We'll make them energy efficient, cutting edge, and sustainable. And I promise you, this is just the beginning. Once we start, we'll create a ripple effect that will attract other businesses and investors to Riverwood. Martha sat back in her chair, still processing what he had said. The skepticism was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Could it really happen? Could Riverwood be revived? I'm not asking you to make any promises right now, Elon continued. I just want to show you what we can do if we work together. But I need your support. I need the town council on board. Are you with me? Martha hesitated for a moment before nodding slowly. You're asking a lot, Mr. Musk, but I'm willing to give you a chance. If you can really pull this off, maybe Riverwood has a future after all. Elon stood, extending his hand once again. Thank you, Mayor Fields. I won't let you down. Elon's plan for Riverwood was moving faster than he anticipated. In just a few days, he had convinced the town's mayor, Martha Fields, to get on board with his vision. Now it was time for the rest of the town to see what he could really do. After the meeting with Martha, Elon immediately set to work. His first order of business was to bring in a team of engineers to assess the condition of the old factories that had once employed most of Riverwood's population. He knew that revitalizing the town wouldn't happen without the right infrastructure in place, and these factories were key. The factories had long since fallen into disrepair. The buildings were old, the equipment outdated, and the machinery was rusted over from years of neglect. Elon knew it wouldn't be easy, but if he could transform these once thriving factories into state-of-the-art facilities, it would be the catalyst the town needed. Elon spent the next few days working closely with the engineers, overseeing the planning and design of the renovations. He insisted on using the latest technologies, integrating energy-efficient systems, and ensuring that the facilities would be sustainable and capable of producing advanced manufacturing components. As much as this project was about economic revival, it was also about showing the town that they weren't just building factories. They were building the future. Meanwhile, back in Riverwood, Elon had arranged meetings with local contractors to discuss the renovation of the Rolling Fork. Karen had agreed to let him take charge of the diner's renovation, and Elon had already started making plans to upgrade the kitchen equipment, repair the structure, and give the space a much-needed facelift. But more than that, he wanted to keep the essence of the place intact. It wasn't just about modernizing the diner, it was about preserving what made it special. The sense of community, the warmth of the regulars, the feeling that this was a place where everyone was welcome. Elon returned to the Rolling Fork one afternoon to check on progress. Karen was behind the counter as usual, serving coffee and chatting with a few of the regulars. The diner was quieter than usual, but the familiar hum of activity was still there. Everything going all right? Elon asked, sitting down at the counter. Karen looked up from the register, giving him a small smile. Yeah, things are going well. The contractors are set to start next week, and I've got some new equipment lined up. But I have to admit, I'm still having trouble believing all this is happening. Elon nodded. He understood her skepticism. A few weeks ago, this town had felt like it was teetering on the brink of collapse. But now things were starting to change. The investment he was pouring into the town wasn't just financial, it was about hope. Hope that Riverwood could be more than just another forgotten town on the map. I get it, Elon said. It's a lot to take in, but this is just the beginning. I'm not just fixing up the diner or the factories. I'm bringing jobs, training, and opportunity back to this town. We're going to make Riverwood a place people are proud to call home again. Karen sighed and leaned against the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. You really think we can turn this place around? We've been trying for years. People keep leaving, Businesses keep closing. It's hard to see a way out. Elon smiled softly. I know it's hard, but change never happens all at once. It's about building momentum, step by step. This town has something special. It's just been buried for a while. Karen didn't say anything, but her expression softened. She was beginning to see the potential in Elon's vision. Elon had made significant progress with the factories, but there was still more to be done. He needed to bring more businesses to Riverwood and create the kinds of opportunities that would entice younger people to stay. That was where the training center came in. He had already spoken to the local community college about offering specialized programs in advanced manufacturing, robotics, and sustainable energy. But he knew that wouldn't be enough. He needed local businesses to step up and help train the next generation of workers. It was a crucial part of his plan. Without the people to fill the jobs, all the factories in the world wouldn't make a difference. Elon took a trip to a nearby city to meet with executives from various companies who might be willing to invest in Riverwood. He spoke to representatives from the clean energy sector, manufacturing firms, and even some tech companies who had shown interest in relocating their operations to smaller towns. The meetings were productive, and by the end of the week, Elon had secured commitments from several companies to set up satellite offices in Riverwood. These companies would not only provide jobs, but would also contribute to the local economy through partnerships with the new training center. Riverwood isn't just a town, Elon said in one of his meetings. It's a blueprint for the future. If we can make this work, if we can show the world that small towns are capable of thriving in the modern economy, we can change everything. We can show that innovation doesn't have to happen in big cities. It can happen right here, where the heart of the country is. The executives were intrigued, but it was the offer of a local workforce, trained in cutting-edge skills, that seemed to seal the deal. Elon's plan was starting to snowball. People were beginning to take notice. Back in Riverwood, word of Elon's investment began to spread. The town was abuzz with excitement. Even the skeptics couldn't ignore the changes taking place. The factory renovations were moving quickly, the diner was about to be transformed, and the promise of new jobs and training programs was a glimmer of hope in what had been a long period of despair. One afternoon, Karen pulled Elon aside while he was walking through the diner, checking on the work being done. You know, I wasn't sure about any of this at first, she said, looking around at the workmen who were installing new equipment and updating the kitchen. But I'm starting to see it now. This town, it's actually going to make it, isn't it? Elon smiled. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. And it starts here. The Rolling Fork isn't just a diner, it's the beating heart of Riverwood. If we can get this right, we can get everything else right. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. Riverwood, once a quiet and forgotten town, was now buzzing with the hum of construction, innovation, and hope. Elon had put his plan into motion, and the pieces were starting to fall into place. The factory renovations were well underway. The equipment had begun arriving, and new businesses were setting up shop in town. Elon had spent much of his time meeting with contractors, engineers, and the teams from the local community college. They were in the process of establishing a dedicated training center, a state-of-the-art facility that would help Riverwood's residents learn new skills in robotics, manufacturing, and clean energy. It wasn't just about building factories anymore. It was about providing the knowledge and resources necessary for the community to thrive long-term. But the real breakthrough came when the first company agreed to move its operations to Riverwood. A tech firm specializing in sustainable energy solutions had signed a lease for office space near the newly renovated factories. This wasn't just any company. It was a high-tech startup that would bring hundreds of jobs to the town. And it wasn't just the jobs that would help, it was the ripple effect. As one company moved in, others were bound to follow. Riverwood was no longer just a place on the map. It was becoming a hub of innovation. Elon was excited, but he also knew there was still a lot of work to do. He continued to check in with the contractors working on the diner, and he was happy to see that the Rolling Fork was almost ready for its grand reopening. The kitchen had been fully upgraded with the latest equipment, and the building had been completely renovated. But even more importantly, the heart of the diner, the sense of community that had always been at its core, was still intact. One afternoon, Elon sat at the counter of the Rolling Fork with Karen, enjoying a freshly made cup of coffee. They had become friends over the past few weeks, with Karen opening up to him about her struggles and dreams for the future. "Things are really starting to change, huh?" Karen said, setting a plate of freshly baked bread in front of him. Elon took a sip of his coffee, nodding. "It's happening faster than I expected, but we've only just begun. We're not just building buildings, we're building a future." Karen leaned back, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You've already done so much for this town, Elon. The diner, the factories, the new companies coming in. But what happens next? How do we make sure all this stays?" Elon smiled, knowing exactly what she meant. "It's not just about the investments. It's about making sure the people of Riverwood are equipped to take over once the foundations are laid. I've been working on some plans with the community college to offer more advanced courses in the coming months. We're going to train a whole new generation of workers, not just in basic manufacturing, but in areas like robotics and energy-efficient technologies." Karen nodded, her eyes shining with hope. "That sounds incredible. It's like Riverwood is finally getting a chance to grow again." Elon looked around the diner, the place where it all started. The regulars were chatting in the back. The smell of fresh food filled the air, and for the first time in a long time, Elon felt a sense of peace. It wasn't about being the richest man in the world. It was about making a real difference in a community that needed it. This was the kind of work that made all his other projects seem small in comparison. Later that afternoon, as he was leaving the Rolling Fork, Elon ran into Mayor Martha Fields. She was walking down the street, taking in the sight of all the construction happening around the town. The atmosphere was different, optimistic, energized, and buzzing with potential. It was a stark contrast to the desolate look Riverwood had just a few months ago. "Mr. Musk," Martha called out as she waved him over. "You won't believe the reaction I'm getting. People are actually excited about Riverwood again. It's like we've been asleep for years and finally woke up." Elon smiled, but he knew the work wasn't done. "We've just started, Mayor, but we're on the right track. This town has more to offer than anyone realizes. The energy here is incredible." Martha looked at him with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "I never thought I'd see the day when Riverwood would be a place people actually wanted to invest in. But you've done it. You've made people believe again." Elon's gaze shifted to the factory buildings in the distance. "We've all done it. I may have provided the initial spark, but the real credit goes to the people of this town. They're the ones who are going to make it work. They're the ones who will keep this going once the foundation is in place." Mayor Fields smiled, her face lighting up with pride. "I think Riverwood is about to become the example for every small town in America. People will look at us and see that it's possible to turn things around." Elon nodded. "Exactly. It's not just about Riverwood anymore. It's about showing the world that small towns can thrive. With the right investments, the right people, and the right vision, anything is possible." As they walked through the newly renovated town center, people waved at them, smiling and stopping to chat. It was clear that Riverwood was starting to come alive again. The town, which had once been a shell of its former self, was beginning to flourish. The empty storefronts were filling with new businesses, and the sounds of construction filled the air as the factories came back to life. Elon looked around and realized that he wasn't just seeing the town through the lens of an outsider anymore. Riverwood had become a part of him, and its success was now his mission. Over the next few days, Elon continued to meet with local business owners and government officials, finalizing plans for the training programs and the continued expansion of the factories. The town was already seeing positive results. Unemployment had dropped, and more people were finding work both in construction and in the new tech companies moving in. The training center was set to open its doors in just a few weeks, and Elon had already arranged for the first round of local residents to start learning about advanced manufacturing. Riverwood was no longer a forgotten town. It was becoming a beacon of what was possible when people believed in a place and were willing to invest in its future. But even as the town started to thrive, Elon knew that true success wouldn't come overnight. It would take time, patience, and hard work. But that was something Elon was familiar with. It wasn't about the quick fix. It was about creating something lasting. And that was exactly what he was going to do. The first month of changes in Riverwood passed by in what felt like the blink of an eye. The factories were starting to take on a new life. The new companies that had signed on were setting up operations, and the people of Riverwood were feeling the excitement of something they hadn't experienced in years: hope. But despite the initial success, Elon knew that this was the crucial point. The momentum was there, but now he needed to ensure that the foundation he had started building would hold steady in the long run. One afternoon, Elon found himself walking down the main street of Riverwood, surveying the progress. The construction sites were busy, the air filled with the sounds of drills and hammers. But there was something else in the atmosphere, a sense of optimism. Storefronts that had been closed for years were now being renovated, and a few had even opened their doors with grand opening signs. Even the local park had been given a facelift, with new playground equipment and freshly painted benches. Elon stopped in front of a newly opened cafe, a small, charming space with rustic decor and a homemade sign that read, "Maggie's Cafe, serving Riverwood's best coffee." He had noticed the place a few times during his walks around town, but had yet to stop in. As he was about to enter, the door swung open and Karen walked out, carrying a box of freshly baked goods. "Mornin'," she called with a warm smile, noticing Elon. "Mornin', Karen," he said, returning the smile. "How's business?" Karen's smile grew wider. "Better than it's been in years. People are starting to trickle back into town, and that's made all the difference." Elon stepped inside the cafe with her, and they both took a seat at one of the wooden tables near the window. The place was cozy, warm with the smell of freshly ground coffee and pastries. It was a far cry from the empty, desolate feel the town had months ago. Karen had invested her own savings into the cafe, and although it was still a small business, it was one of the many new ventures that had come to life in the town. "Things are really picking up, aren't they?" Elon said, taking a sip of the coffee Maggie had just poured for him. "Feels like the town's waking up again," Karen agreed, her eyes sparkling with hope. "And to think it all started with you and your crazy idea. I honestly didn't think it'd work." Elon chuckled. "Well, I don't know if I'd call it a crazy idea, but I'm glad to see it's working. Still, we've only scratched the surface. There's a lot more we need to do if we want to make this last." Karen nodded. "That's true. People are excited, but they're also cautious. A lot of folks have been burned before. They're going to need to see that this is for real." Elon paused, thinking for a moment. "The key is sustainability. We need to make sure that once we bring in new businesses and industries, Riverwood can stand on its own. The training center, the factories, the new companies moving in, these are all essential, but we also need to build a strong foundation for the future." As they chatted, the sound of more construction echoed in the background. People were working hard, but there was also a new energy in the town. There was a sense that, for the first time in a long while, things were moving in the right direction. Elon spent the next few days continuing to oversee the ongoing projects. He checked in with the contractors working on the factories, made sure that the training center was on track, and met with more business owners who were interested in relocating to Riverwood. As the town grew, so did the promise of a brighter future. But there was still one major hurdle left to tackle: the people. While the factories were being revived, businesses were moving in, and jobs were being created, it was the town's residents who needed to see the long-term vision and embrace the changes. Many of the town's young people had left in search of better opportunities, and it was time to bring them back home. Elon's strategy for this wasn't just about offering jobs. It was about showing them that Riverwood had a future, that it was no longer a town to escape, but a place to build something real. The training center he had partnered with the community college to create was a big part of that. It wasn't just about teaching the next generation how to operate machinery. It was about giving them the tools to lead Riverwood into the future. As the opening day for the Riverwood Technical Training Center neared, Elon found himself reflecting on the journey so far. When he first drove into the town, it had felt like any other forgotten small town, a place that had lost its sense of hope. But now it felt alive again. The streets were filled with people, the factories were buzzing with activity, and the cafe was packed with locals enjoying their morning coffee. A few days before the grand opening of the training center, Elon decided to hold a meeting with the town's leaders, business owners, and a few of the new hires who had recently joined the workforce. He wanted to take stock of where they were and where they were headed. Elon stood in front of a group of about 50 people in the town hall, all eyes on him as he addressed them. I want to start by saying how proud I am of everything we've accomplished together. Riverwood is starting to become a model for how small towns across America can revive and thrive. But this is just the beginning. The real challenge is ensuring that everything we built is sustainable for the future. Martha Fields, the mayor, stood beside him, smiling. What Elon has done here is nothing short of incredible. Riverwood is waking up from the slump it's been in for so long. We're seeing new businesses, new jobs, and most importantly, a new sense of hope. We're starting to believe again. Elon continued. It's about the long term. You've all seen what happens when businesses and communities lose sight of what really matters. But Riverwood is different. You've got something that others don't, a community that supports each other, a place where everyone matters. And that's what will make all the difference. The crowd murmured in agreement. People were starting to believe. They weren't just seeing the changes, they were living them. And they were starting to feel the power of what could happen when a town pulled together. As the meeting wrapped up, Elon felt a deep sense of accomplishment. It was clear that Riverwood was no longer the same place he had walked into months ago. It was evolving, growing, and embracing a new future. The first steps of a true transformation were now visible for everyone to see. And even though there was still much work to be done, Elon knew one thing for sure. Riverwood was on its way to becoming something greater than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just about factories and jobs. It was about the people, the heart of the town. And that, more than anything, would ensure its success. The grand opening of the Riverwood Technical Training Center was a day that had been eagerly awaited by the town's residents. It was the culmination of months of hard work, countless phone calls, and tireless planning. Elon had envisioned it as the next step in Riverwood's transformation, an investment in the future of the town that would provide young people with the skills they needed to succeed in the modern economy. On the day of the opening, the sun was shining, and a gentle breeze rustled through the trees as people gathered outside the sleek new building. It stood proudly at the edge of the town, modern and efficient, with solar panels on the roof and walls made of sustainable materials. Inside, the classrooms were filled with the latest technology, including 3D printers, robotics labs, and workstations for sustainable energy projects. Elon had spared no expense in making sure the center was equipped with everything the town's future workforce would need. Elon arrived early, walking through the doors of the center as a group of local students, some of whom had never had access to such advanced technology, eagerly awaited their first day of training. The excitement in the air was palpable. Elon had already spoken to some of the students and instructors, but today he would be addressing the entire group. As the crowd gathered, Elon took a moment to step back and look at the scene. This was the vision coming to life, the dream of turning Riverwood into a thriving, sustainable community powered by innovation and education. People of all ages were here, some in their 20s, others in their 40s or 50s, but they all had one thing in common. They were determined to change their lives, to learn, and to help Riverwood grow. Martha Fields, the mayor, took the stage to give a brief speech before Elon's. She looked out at the crowd, her voice full of pride. This is a moment that I could only dream of a few months ago. Riverwood was on the brink of fading into the past, but now, thanks to Elon Musk and the vision he shared with us, we have a chance to build something better, a future for our children, our grandchildren, and for every generation to come. The crowd erupted into applause, and Martha smiled as she stepped aside to make way for Elon. As he walked to the podium, the crowd fell silent, eager to hear what he had to say. Elon adjusted the microphone and looked around at the group of people before him. There was a lot at stake, but there was also something else, a sense of belonging, a shared purpose. Riverwood was no longer a forgotten town. It was a place where change was happening, where people were learning to adapt and innovate, and where the future was starting to look brighter. This town has something special, Elon began, his voice steady. When I first came to Riverwood, I saw potential. I saw a community that had been overlooked, but that still had the heart and spirit to fight for its future. What we've done here is not just about building factories or opening businesses. It's about giving people the opportunity to build something meaningful with their own hands. And that's exactly what the training center is about. giving you the tools to shape your own future. The crowd was still, listening intently. Elon continued, his words carrying weight. I've seen towns all over the country struggling, unable to adapt to the changes in the economy. But I believe Riverwood can be different. You are the ones who will make this work. The factories are only part of the equation. The people here, the skills you learn, and the work you put into this town, that's what will ensure Riverwood thrives in the long term. As he finished his speech, there was a sense of quiet accomplishment in the air. It wasn't about Elon's investment or his name. It was about the people who had come together to make this change happen. After the ceremony, Elon spent the rest of the day visiting the classrooms and meeting with students. He watched as they worked with the new equipment, learning how to design and build robots, program automation systems, and understand sustainable energy processes. The energy in the rooms was contagious. For the first time, the students weren't just dreaming of a better life. They were learning how to build it. Later in the day, Elon found himself at the Rolling Fork, watching as the diner buzzed with customers. The renovations had transformed the space, and the food was as good as ever. People were talking and laughing, enjoying the community that had been fostered here. Karen was working behind the counter, serving plates of food with her usual warm smile. Elon took a seat at the counter, his mind still racing with the progress that had been made. He had always been focused on big projects, whether it was building rockets or electric cars. But this was different. Riverwood had become personal to him. It wasn't just about the investment or the factories. It was about the lives he was changing, the people he was helping, and the opportunity to make a real difference. Another round of coffee? Karen asked, noticing him lost in thought. Sure, Elon replied, snapping out of his reverie. You know, it's hard to believe how much has changed around here in just a few months. Karen poured him a fresh cup of coffee and set it down in front of him. You've really done something, Elon. I mean, just look at the people coming in and out of here. It's like a different world. Elon looked around, seeing the same regulars who had been here long before he arrived. But now the place felt different. It felt like a gathering place for something bigger than just a meal. It was a symbol of the town's revival. I couldn't have done it without people like you, Elon said. You've kept this place going when others would have given up. And now look at this. The Rolling Fork is not just a diner. It's part of the heart of this town. It's the spirit of Riverwood, and it's going to be here for a long time. Karen smiled, her eyes softening with gratitude. It's all coming together. The hard part is over, but now we have to make sure it stays. We need to keep the momentum going. Elon nodded, knowing she was right. The work wasn't done yet. But as he looked around Riverwood, at the bustling streets, the open businesses, and the energy in the air, he knew that the town was on the right path. They had started something that couldn't be undone, something that was bigger than any of them. It had been nearly 6 months since Elon first set foot in Riverwood, and now as he stood on the edge of the newly renovated town square, he couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. The factories were running at full capacity, the businesses were thriving, and the once quiet streets were bustling with activity. Riverwood had gone from a dying town to a beacon of hope and innovation. The Riverwood Technical Training Center had successfully opened its doors, and the first wave of students had already completed their courses in advanced manufacturing, robotics, and sustainable energy. Graduates were already securing jobs with the new companies moving in, while others had started their own businesses. The center had become a cornerstone of the town's future, providing the skills and knowledge necessary to propel Riverwood into the 21st century. Elon had spent the last few months traveling back and forth between Riverwood and his various other ventures. But now, as the final pieces of the town's revitalization were falling into place, he felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just about the success of the factories or the jobs being created. It was about seeing the community come together. Riverwood wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. He walked into the Rolling Fork, the heart of the town, which had become an even more central gathering place than before. The diner was filled with familiar faces, people chatting over meals, laughing, and enjoying the atmosphere of a town that had found its rhythm again. Karen, the diner's owner, was behind the counter, serving a new group of customers with a smile. "Hey, Elon," Karen greeted him warmly. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Things are pretty busy around here these days." Elon grinned. I wouldn't miss it for the world. He sat at the counter, watching the familiar scene unfold before him. The town had changed, but it hadn't lost its character. People were still gathering here, sharing stories, making plans, and supporting one another. This was the real Riverwood, the people who had built it, the community that had fought for it, and the spirit that had never been lost. Things are looking good, Elon said, taking a sip of his coffee. Karen smiled. Better than good. I never thought I'd see this day, but here we are. Yeah, Elon agreed, glancing out the window at the thriving town. It's incredible how quickly it's all come together. But the real credit goes to the people of Riverwood. You guys have made it work. I just provided the spark. The diner door swung open, and a familiar face stepped in. Mayor Martha Fields. She was smiling, her usual demeanor a mixture of pride and determination. She made her way over to Elon and Karen. Elon, she said, shaking his hand, I wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for Riverwood. You've helped us turn the tide. We've got new businesses, new jobs, and most importantly, a new sense of purpose. It's been a long time since this town has felt like it has a future. Elon nodded. The real work starts now. It's about sustainability, making sure the changes stick. But Riverwood is in a great place, Mayor Fields agreed. We have the training center, the factories, and the businesses, but we also have the community, and that's what will keep this place going for years to come. As they chatted, a group of young people came in, talking excitedly about the new opportunities available in the town. Some had just graduated from the technical center, while others were looking for work with the new companies that had moved into Riverwood. There was a sense of energy in the air, a belief that things were going to continue improving, not just for today, but for generations to come. Elon listened as they talked about their plans, their dreams, and the projects they hoped to work on. He had done this before. He had seen how the future could be shaped by innovation and determination. But this was different. This wasn't just about technology. This was about people. This was about giving them the tools and resources to take control of their own futures, to shape their community, and to make a real impact on the world. As the conversation drifted to other topics, Elon felt a deep sense of pride. He had built rockets, electric cars, and solar panels. He had created businesses that had changed the world, but nothing had felt quite as fulfilling as watching Riverwood rise from the ashes. This was more than just a successful project, it was a legacy. Later that evening, as the sun set over Riverwood, Elon took one last walk through the town. The streets were lit up with streetlights, casting a warm glow on the sidewalks. The factory buildings were now fully operational, buzzing with activity, and the town square was alive with people enjoying the evening. The transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. But it wasn't just the physical changes. Elon had seen the shift in the people, in the way they carried themselves, in the way they spoke about their future. Riverwood wasn't just a town that had been saved, it was a town that had found its purpose again. As he stood at the edge of the park, watching children play on the newly renovated playground equipment, Elon thought about the journey that had brought him here. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments of doubt. But now, as he looked around at the people of Riverwood, he knew that it had all been worth it. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his assistant, Zara. The mission in Riverwood is complete. We've built something that will last. He paused for a moment, feeling the weight of the words. It wasn't just about the factories or the technology. It was about creating a community where people had the chance to grow, learn, and thrive. And for the first time in a long while, Elon felt like he had made a real difference. As he made his way back to the Rolling Fork, where the warmth of community and the comfort of home awaited him, he knew one thing for sure: Riverwood had found its place in the world again. And with that, he could rest easy knowing that he had played a part in making that happen. Months passed, and Riverwood continued to grow. The factories expanded, new businesses moved in, and the training center became a beacon for towns across the country. The momentum was unstoppable now. People who had left Riverwood returned to raise families, build careers, and contribute to the town's revival. The success of Riverwood inspired similar projects in other small towns across America, showing that even in the most unexpected places, change was possible. And in the heart of Riverwood, the Rolling Fork continued to serve as a gathering place for the community, a symbol of the town's resilience and its future. Elon Musk's name was no longer just associated with rockets and electric cars. It was a name that symbolized the power of vision, determination, and the belief that even the smallest towns could make a big difference. As for Riverwood, it had become more than just a story of survival. It had become a story of triumph, and it was only just beginning.